We last saw you in Hong Kong at Bitcoin Asia. Great event, great trip. Definitely recommend going to Hong Kong if they have the conference back there. How was your trip to Bitcoin Asia?
It was the first time there was fantastic. I've been spending the last year or so traveling the world, really talking to people about how they're using Bitcoin. It was a great stop. That was a great event. I think there were more than 20,000 people showed up in Hong Kong. Looking forward to the show later in August, back in Hong Kong.
Since we last saw you, we're here at the conference. Price has kind of been inching up and then pulling back and inching up and pulling back. And it's 76 or 75 today. What's been the overall sentiment in the conference? We've talked about like just the overall numbers people appearing, but it seems like it hasn't really been the biggest topic. It's everything outside of it.
I'd agree. I've said to multiple people, I feel like this is the bullish bear market I've ever been a part of. And I think what's getting missed more broadly in terms of the news coverage is how much building is going on right now in terms of really enthusiastically building out capability, building out new products and innovation that will ultimately find its way to the market. Just as an example, I think the announcement that was talked about yesterday at the conference in terms of Square unlocking Bitcoin for payments for 800,000 merchants is a great example of the building that's going on to increase acceptance, increase awareness that I hopefully will continue to drive the overall adoption of Bitcoin in general.
One thing we talk about a lot on our Wednesday show and co-host Halston's, typically we're like diving into personal finance and what Gen Z is doing, and they have to approach it differently than someone buying Bitcoin. 15, 17. Price is different. They generally aren't well capitalized coming out of college, and they are concerned about saving for a house. How have you guys thought about how you make SALT lending, the products you do, borrowing against your Bitcoin, make those appeal?
So first of all, I think it's a great point, and I am a big believer that Bitcoin is democratizing wealth building, full stop. That when you look and around my travels globally, the average age of first-time home buyership is going up over the age of 40. So what the F are you supposed to do in your 20s and 30s? You're not going to wait to buy an asset until you're over 40. So what is the vehicle to build wealth? And I think Bitcoin really will fill that and help provide an alternative. And one of the best things about it is like you can get started with a little amount of money, but still apply the strategies that the ultra wealthy have been using for centuries. So when you think about what the ultra wealthy have done, when you have $50 million in a private banker, you buy appreciating assets, you don't sell them, and you borrow against them to reinvest or to live your life. And Bitcoin is opening up that opportunity for everybody. And you can start, we have customers that start accumulating sort of their stack, borrow against it at 5,000, 10,000, maybe for a little trip or emergency expense. But I think that's fantastic because one of the most important things for me is that people are learning how to manage a loan and how to manage Bitcoin as a wealth asset to be able to change their trajectory of their lives.
Have you seen that? You guys, are you at a place where you're traveling internationally? So are you going, like what markets are you really focused on going after? And is it all like spectrums of, wealth classes, or what's kind of your core focus?
So we traditionally have been predominantly North America. We're the largest lender in North America. We lend in 48 states. Looking to get those last two, but we also lend internationally, and we're looking to expand the international lending because what's interesting is the core problem is the same. Everybody wants a solid store of value. They want to have flexibility with their finances, and Bitcoin is a great vehicle. The history of SALT, we've been around for a decade, and we really started in the retail and the small business space with individual loans for people that owned Bitcoin but couldn't get the benefits of the banking system any other way. And actually, miners were sort of the small businesses we started out with because they wanted to be able to borrow against their asset to fund operations and fund capital expenses. But both audiences are in this place where with a loan, they never want to be a forced seller and trying to look for that flexibility that if you do want to sell, it's on your terms and it's at a price that you're comfortable with.
It's going to be Jerome Powell's last speech as Fed chairman. We're bringing in yours. What is your outlook generally, and you don't have to be a macro expert, but what generally is your outlook kind of rest of the year? Do you think the oil shortage and the deposit of shipments of oil going through Hormuz really going to slow us down, or like, what's your sentiment?
So I mean, I try not to get overly worried about sort of the day-to-day Bitcoin price. I do think from a macroeconomic perspective, the uncertainty is having everybody sit on their hands a little bit more. It'd be nice to have the war resolved one way or another in terms of clarity around what that is. I think that we have favorable sort of tailwinds when we think about the regulatory environment, both with the Clarity Act appearing to be in a position to get passed hopefully in the near future. We have sort of a favorable sort of Fed chair coming in terms of his outlook of Bitcoin and crypto. I think even small things like the $300 sort of de minimis tax proposal that's out there. So if you use Bitcoin to make purchases below $300, you don't have to pay tax on it. Like I'm a big believer. It's like you've got to use Bitcoin to understand it, and then you can say, I don't want to spend any more of it once I sort of understand more about how it really works. I do think there, despite the volatility in the global market, that there are some positives that come out of it. I mean, the fact that Iran and countries want Bitcoin and people are sending large amounts of Bitcoin to make payments, I think shows its utility as a larger store of value, but as something that, hey, it is censorship resistant. So if you don't want your assets seized, here's the best signal ever. In a time of tension, people are asking for Bitcoin as a payment.
And I think it's powerful to see countries, we talk about like strategic reserves and countries going to follow along. And, it really hasn't taken any US with that favorable movement on legislation, but it hasn't really taken off in the same way that people expected when Trump was in Nashville and the Big One conference in 2024. But to have a conflict where people are really concerned about like money movement, you have these ships coming through and people scamming each other, and getting fake bribes to go through. It's good to see Bitcoin actually be used in like a live scenario.
I agree. I mean, it is playing out use cases, and I think in financial services in general, it hasn't been the more mature markets that have generally driven innovation. It's the underdeveloped markets that really have a more critical need, and I think we're seeing that through Central America, South America. We're seeing it in the Middle East right now in terms of the conflict, how Bitcoin is being used. If you want to move a lot of money, you're not going to do it in gold, right? You just can't get the transportation, let alone anything else. And so
can't safely transport on a ship these days.
Yeah, you don't want to risk being sort of the pirates or just having the ship sink. So I think there's some utility in terms of the use cases that are playing out in this sort of highly sort of attested situations that I think we will look back overall in terms of being a real indicator of the strength of the asset class globally.
What's next for you guys this week, or for SALT in general, coming out?
Yeah. So I was just on a panel with CJ, and we were talking about sort of Bitcoin-backed lending and home mortgages and home ownership. The big thing for us is we're focused on really taking out the volatility of Bitcoin-backed lending, just like Strategy is doing with fixed income instruments. If you think about digital credit being fixed income on one side and liquidity on the other side, we are innovating and bringing out new products. We have a product called Salt Shield, as well as stabilization, where it's helping take the volatility out of borrowing. So as an individual borrower, you don't have to worry about your LTV as much, and you get into a place where you can take advantage of the value you've built up in your Bitcoin and then manage it based on your own risk profile and preference.
So that is actually a big topic. We had Fong Lee on here to close out today, is thinking about volatility, the options market. We talk about options a fair amount on Tuesdays. We talk about like public equity markets. But then he's like, yeah, we actually spent a ton of time talking about stripping away that volatility. So that's something you guys are shifting towards, which I think is very interesting. Instead of just having a treasury company, it's like, hey, let's build some of these products that can help people if they're not ready to have their net worth fluctuate so much throughout the day.
Look, I think what Strategy and Fong and Saylor are doing are great in terms of allowing a different entry point into exposure to Bitcoin. But it's not owning spot. So you give up, and look, I mean, we have customers that are taking out loans against their Bitcoin and going and buying Stretch for, in terms of building this asset-based income stack as a way to do that. And I think that's interesting in terms of people playing. But also, once you own the asset, you own spot, you have a lot of flexibility about what you can do with it. And so, we want to take out the volatility alone so that people can think about borrowing against their Bitcoin for reinvestment, whether it's in Stretch, whether it's in income producing assets like rental apartment, or just retirement. You don't want to have to worry about sort of losing your stack in terms of the LTV volatility if you're trying to retire on it. Some of it's educating people about how to think about risk management, and LTV is one of them, but also new product design is another piece of that puzzle.
So you have to keep us posted on that, because we are diving in a lot on Wednesdays to Stretch and Strike, and also SATA that's coming from Stride.
Yep.
And Jeff Walton is on here on Monday as well. So there's a lot to unpack, and I think a lot of people want to talk about it, figure out what's the right mix for them if they want to go that route. And a lot of times it's people looking for income these days, unsure about how AI is going to disrupt job market. So good to be talking about it now so we can suss out what's going to be the best one.
No, I think it's an important topic. I mean, I do a lot of financial education. One of the things I talk about is encourage people to think about how do you make the shift from labor-based income to asset-based income. And that's an important shift, and you have to change your mindset about what assets you want to accumulate, and once you have the assets, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to leverage them? And how comfortable are you managing that strategy? Just because we now have the strategies that the ultra-rich have always been able to leverage in terms of buying assets, never selling them, and borrowing against them to build wealth, you still got to learn how to do it responsibly and figure out, what is going to be your own personal strategy.
It absolutely advise people to do a ton of research, learn about what the risks are involved, and then come on and talk in communities. I think people that are in communities and going to meetups love talking about this stuff. They love talking about it. Well, Hunter, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. We'll have to see you the next one. Are you going to be at BTC Prague? Are you going to be?
Don't know about BTC Prague. We'll definitely be going back to Hong Kong in August, and so I'm sure we'll sort of bump into each other along the way.
Amazing.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.